Once we identify misinformation that requires attention and understand the barriers that can make correcting it difficult, the next step is determining the most effective way of dealing with that misinformation to minimize its negative and harmful impact on the public. While we still have much to learn about misinformation, this video provides 7 best practices for correcting misinformation as it spreads across a population. Number 1, timing is important. Arguably, the best approach is to deliver warnings ahead of misinformation spread or at the same time it is being seen or heard by audiences. This is, of course, not always possible, but public health officials should always pay attention to the types of rumors spreading about COVID-19 or the COVID-19 vaccines on social media or in other ways. If a rumor is starting to spread, prepare and issue corrections before it reaches more people. If you cannot get your correction out before the misinformation has spread, you should issue your correction as quickly as possible before the misinformation can fully take hold in memory. Research has shown that the longer misinformation is allowed to stick in your memory, the more difficult it becomes to correct. Number 2, repetition, repetition, repetition. Experimental studies have established that restating the correcting information multiple times without repeating and thus spreading the original misinformation can be effective for dealing with public misperceptions. The goal here is to have the new correct information stick in memory while allowing the false information to fade away. Number 3, explain your correction. While repeating a correction is helpful, your correction should always indicate the lie in the original information and provide an explanation for why the lie seems so credible. For example, during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a rumor that vaccines against pneumonia also protect against COVID-19. An effective strategy here might be to repeat multiple times that vaccines against pneumonia offer no protection against COVID-19. But your message should also stress that while COVID-19 can cause pneumonia, it is ultimately a separate health issue that requires its own unique vaccine and treatment. Number 4, consider the sources you use. So far, research has shown that subject matter expert sources work better than general public sources when correcting misinformation. But credibility is also closely tied to trust. Therefore, your source should be someone your target audience trusts. Otherwise, the correction will have little effect. In fact, a correction from an untrusted source may even backfire, further solidifying the misinformation in the minds of your audience. The best corrections can sometimes come from an unlikely or surprising source that is trusted by the audience. For example, if a vaccine skeptic with a large following gets COVID-19 and then regrets not getting the vaccine, that person can be used very effectively to spread a pro-vaccination message. Number 5, be first and last. One thing to remember is that when people evaluate information, they tend to rely heavily on the first and most recent information. These are called primacy and recency effects. Primacy effects explain why misinformation can be so difficult to correct. Recency effects explain why repeating your correction multiple times can be effective. Number 6, keep it simple. Always remember when you are correcting misinformation to do so in plain language. This expands the audience for your information. It makes the information understandable to everyone and easier to recall. Public health officials often have a hard time translating scientific concepts into plain language. This can be overcome with practice. Number 7, combine your approaches. When countering the spread of misinformation, consider combining the different best practices we just discussed. A great example of this is the truth sandwich, which involves 3 steps. You begin by starting with the truth. People tend to remember the first things they hear when presented with a message. Then indicate the lie. Whenever possible, avoid repeating the original wording of the lie and instead explain why it is a lie and why it is not to be trusted. Finally, return to the truth. Ending with the truth allows you to finish your communication with the information you want to stick. To learn more, please continue to tune into our risk communication principles and COVID-19 vaccine misconceptions and misinformation training series.